Gotcha.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening. Hello.
I'm fine, sir. Welcome to Mycon Podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah. We would like to work on your framing. We want to see more of your chest.
What am I hearing now, sir? Oh, sir.
Yeah, yeah, you can.
in this edition of the Mike On Podcast.
The administration of President Bola Tinubu has a lot of issues to resolve. Part of what he met was the epileptic electricity condition and the United Arab Emirates visa ban slammed on Nigeria in October of 2022. On Thursday, the 14th of September 2023, there was a collapse of the national power grid, which left Nigeria in power outage. With monies spent by successive governments, one will expect that the issues of such blackout would have been addressed, considering the amount of money that goes in there. President Tinubu met with the United Arab Emirates leader recently for bilateral talks, and the Nigerian government said the visa ban was lifted due to the president's visit. But in a twist of event, an official is quoted denying the lifting of the ban. How has the president's approach been on these important issues of governance? John Sheung Okinbalue as he drives this conversation today on the Mike On Podcast.
The 60% of Us series.
Well, hello and welcome everyone to the Mike On Podcast. I'm Sheung Okinbalue. Although this podcast affords more people to air their views on current affairs and political issues and events of the moment, it is independent of my every weekday Politics Today program and Sunday Politics on the weekend on Channels Television. During the week, a total system collapse caused a widespread power cuts across Nigeria. Levels of power generated in Africa's most populous country fell to 0 megawatts. Connections were gradually restored throughout the day, but as we speak, the situation is still as good as bad. That's on one hand. On the other hand, what has gotten Nigerians talking is the Nigeria-Uae visa ban situation. You remember that a president went to the United Arab Emirates, and on that trip, the president made it clear of what he wanted. He had the intention to be able to resolve the lingering crisis between both nations, some of the unrest in terms of diplomatic relations, which are saying that most Nigerians are not able to travel to that country, and some of the airlines and businesses also have been impaired. Nigerians who have one business or the other with the Middle East country heaved a sigh of relief when the Nigerian government broke the news that the months-old visa ban had been lifted. But in report on Friday, there was CNN quoted an official of the UAE saying that the visa ban on Nigerians is still in effect so far. What is going on? Is this a mere case of miscommunication in these very interesting times in the early stages of this government? But we, of course, will be hearing government officials talking about this. But we'll talk about one major issue. We dovetail into other issues. And the podcast today is going to be brisk, precise, and straight to the point. And of course, we'll get to hear from you, everyone. So let's get talking. I have today a professor of law, someone who understands the power grid, the electricity situation in the country, the solutions, the problems of electricity in Nigeria. He's a former chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, professor of law, Dr. Sam Amadi. He joins us today on the podcast. Thank you so much, Dr. Amadi, for joining us today on the podcast. It's good to have you on.
Thank you. Hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. Great. I mean, I like to tap into a whole lot of your knowledge base on some of these issues that we have confronting us, and a lot of Nigerians who are watching and listening on this podcast today, of course, will have a sense of what exactly is going on in our country yet again. Now, we have a new Minister of Power, Mr. Adebayo Adelabu, whom we know his antecedent, his profile. He was once in the central bank. You know, he understands financial issues and all of that. But how much of the power problems in Nigeria does he understand? But what really happened? This, in fact, is the major crisis when it comes to power and electricity under the Tinubu government. But give us an understanding. Almost to a total power collapse in the country in the past few days. What do you make of it?
Well, in 2022, we had so many of those collapses, about, by some count, about 9 or there, about 7 to 9 total collapse, blackout. And the government claimed to have got 400 days for the first time of no such collapse. So the impression given is that somehow we have fixed the fragility of the grid. But we know really, Chill, that the grid is very fragile. This type of collapse tells a story about the fact that the grid has not stabilized. We're not only dealing with inadequate electricity, we're not dealing with maybe poor electricity service, including billing and customer care. We're also dealing with a very weak transmission and system network. So the official line is that this is caused by fire around some of the networks in Niger State, and they couldn't control it. But what I know is, you know, when you unbundle technically, as we did in 2000, meaning you separate generation, distribution, and transmission. The notion is that you're going to have more efficiency as each of these value chain becomes an independent sector managed by different companies. So we have the Central Corporate of Nigeria under the TCN. But what happens is that you need a high level of coordination, aided by technology, with what we call SCADA system, so that you can pick troubles, early warning signals, troubleshoot fast. If there are problems, you move in fast and deal with them. But we are still running a very, low-tech grid, a grid that's not looped together, radial. That means it's just lying, it's not connected. And so those fragility means that we are at the risk of sudden system failure, which is what we had now. So bottom line is we are still far from reliable electricity. We are talking about adequacy, having more capacity, having more generation of the network, having discos, meter and customer, but we also are falling short of reliability, even of the grid, even the limited 4,000 or thereabouts megawatts for 200 million people. So we are energy staff, but at the same time, we have very low reliability because the network needs high level of technological support, some of them need to be scrapped and reconstructed. And then, of course, we need to have a more efficient management team at the TCN.
Interesting. So I like to get straight to the point. From your understanding of the system, that kind of disaster that happened at that site, how soon do you think that we Nigerians can start having electricity? Because that is the bottom line. That is what a lot of Nigerians want to hear. Some of them are in total blackout. Some of them are now having to buy fuel that they do not even have money to, in the first place, to even to come by to buy. Now they've got to now power their house with generators powered by petrol or diesel, as the case may be. From what has happened in that site, how soon do you think Nigerians can get electricity?
Well, first, it took about 10 to 11 hours before TCN was able to resolve the crisis, and then power started coming in gradually. What happens when you have a total collapse? Then the grid picks up maybe out of the 4,000 megawatts. Can pick in the next 1 hour, can pick like 100, 200, 400, 1,000 megawatts. So keep picking, and then some areas begin to have light. Before everybody have light, I mean everybody, meaning before you have restoration of situation before the collapse, it might even take days. So right now, I think most of the loads are back. But the question is, how do we avoid this happening? I think that we need to really depoliticize power and say, you know what? There is a massive structural problem. The policy that's driving this sector, the National Electric Power Policy, was signed in 2000. We're talking about close to something years. In 2000, now we're talking about 2023. So about 23 years, that policy needs real radical reform because it was done when the notion of free market was so rampant. The liberal economics was everywhere. So private sector will fix everything. But we're seeing from examples from Chile, the UK, itself, where we borrowed the model, from Egypt, what they're doing now, that there is need to rethink that policy framework. Second point is we need to have people as ministers in the power sector who have the capability, experience. They don't need to be engineers as a matter of fact, no. But they need to be people who, they one, understands the problem, studied it, have made comments, so they hit the ground running. They would do respect the minister, might be a very smart guy, have worked in Central Bank, so deputy governor idea. I think he's a very smart person. But what clearly is going to be an understudy for some time. He doesn't really understand. So the sector needs to have very strong leadership. Leadership that's not just strong in brutalizing everybody, but strong in understanding, diagnosis of the problem, and able to start implementations that are durable and effective. And third, I think that the government should see electricity supply as critical to any economic recovery and economic growth in the sustainable. I mean, it's going to be difficult for any economy with this level of epileptic, unreliable electricity to grow at 7% consistently for, let's say, a decade or more. That's what we need. It needs to overcome the deficit of the last 8 years and to begin to, aspire to get to medium economy. So with that level of economic growth, with the level of human development deficit, poverty, that we need to quickly stop people sliding into poverty and see if we can get more out of poverty. As of today, the World Bank is estimating about 95 to maybe 100 million people is too big for Nigeria, and about 7 to 10 million people in the last 6 months since 2003 that got into poverty, extra poverty. So the rate of, if you look at the global poverty clock, Nigerians are moving faster than even Ethiopia. Ethiopia is moving at faster than Nigeria is moving in faster. So it's not about the quantum of poverty today, it's about the rate of impoverization. So I think that we need to take electricity as priority, both for the businesses, both for the larger economy, and for household, human capital, education, health, and the local economy. So SMEs, so you can't even talk about mitigating the fuel crisis with SME, and at the same time, you don't have, reliable grid that will reduce cost of energy, which is about 30 to 40% or more of cost of production. So I think we need that level of diligence and get tested persons with ideas, not just that they're working the sector engineers, people who have shown that they have ideas that are going to implement. There may be need for a presidential commission or committee of 3 experts to first quickly look at the underlying problem, rethink the framework, the policy framework, and create some simple to follow, roadmap again to start with minimizing outages and slippages so that we can even optimize the total power we have now. And then in the medium to long term, quick expansion of the grid in terms of distribution and generation and transmission. But in the short term, optimize, reduce inefficiency, reduce collapses, reduce slippages, reduce outages, so that Nigerians have more uptime power, even as we try to expand the grid and ramp up.
All right. So I'd like to ask you this. The man in charge, the Minister of Power, Adelabu Adebayo, do you think that it can get the job done?
I think alone he can't get the job done. There's no experience, not much in this sector. But if he's capable, if he's able to put together a team around himself of persons who are objective, honest, and have real insight, they can get the job done. I mean, the thing about leadership is not just about their own knowledge. It's about the ability to quick understand issues, get the right people on the team, hopefully make the right decision. And again, above all, people in the power sector have been tempted to think about projects they can do to make money, or they're more concerned with making money, and so they make silly mistakes. So if there's no hidden agenda, no pecuniary interest, then you can learn fast, you can get the right people, and you will make the right policy choice. So I think those are the conditions. If you can succeed.
There is one thing that worries me, though, and this narrative of the fact that there are people who are benefiting from Nigeria, from the darkness in Nigeria, from the outages in Nigeria. Do you have a sense that these cabals, if they exist truly within the power sector, you have operated in that sector before, for many Nigerians who are watching and listening tonight, do you have a sense that these people still have a stronghold, if they do exist truly, that some people are benefiting from the darkness of Nigeria and not allowing Nigeria to experience uninterrupted power supply? Is that so?
Well, Shehu, I don't believe, when I was neck, I said, look, the cabal, people think the mechanos of this world, the importers are all good. They are not the cabal. Yeah, they are taking advantage of the problem that was solved. The real problem is in terms of policy, the management of the network, the MDs, the government officials of Amsterdam, who see the power sector, typical of Nigeria public sector corruption, as a place for procurement. And I give an example. When I was chairman and partner minister, and we used to hear about, okay, what 5 billion to put in our fund. I would tell Mr. President, I don't think you need to do that. In a regulated market, those things should pass through like we should look at relevance. Some of the projects we hear about are not relevant. Some of them are over bloated costs. So when we say we spend 200 million to strengthen transmission, it might be that only 30% of that 200 million actually went to rework. Probably if we spent 100 million, honestly, we could actually achieve more. So for me, the real cabal are the public officials who are extremely corrupt, who see the power sector as a place to do deals. The directors, the business guys who are out there, they have like typical business guys, take advantage. So we need to have people in that policy who are not business people. I mean, it's wrong to have an investor, somebody who wants to run a power plant, somebody who wants to build a power plant, to call it the minister of power. I thought it was a wrong idea to have third persons. No, because they are thinking about privatize and buy themselves. They're thinking about how to profit. Bring people who are technocrats, people who are committed to policy and who are not businessmen. The notion that, you need business leaders to run as ministers is not true. If you look at Asian countries that did well, because one of the failures of development policy is special interests. You need to have people who can work happily with business companies, but who are not themselves business people and themselves are not doing deals with them. That's the problem. So many of our project choices are wrong, but they are done because there's a business to profit from them. So they recover actually corrupt public officials, not really the director sellers who will change their business once you solve the problem. If you see some of them go into maybe microgrid, they'll move into embedded generation, they will take license. Some of them even have licenses. They will migrate to becoming directors or getting themselves the value chain. That's my thought. That's all.
So I like to cap all this conversation in this way, Doc. There are those who believe that if Tinubu is to succeed in terms of rejuvenating the economy, we need to produce. The heavy manufacturing companies need to have a sense of of a place of pride and a sense that they have an environment that they can really operate in. And if those companies that Mr. Tinubu has gone to speak to some Indian investors too, and we are looking at foreign direct investment, all of these heavy manufacturing companies, the heavy car manufacturing companies, all of these other ones, we need power to succeed. If you're to tell President Tinubu one thing tonight about fixing the power sector in Nigeria, aside the bills that he has signed and all what have you, what would that one thing be?
The one thing I'll tell you that President Tinubu, look, in the short term, put up a presidential tax team of power, made up of persons who are courageous, knowledgeable, and have no business link with the private sector. See, I can't emphasize, part of development is special interest, corruption. It doesn't about stealing money. It's about being compromised. You're already a business person. So get these guys, their job will be to track the inefficiencies that need to be done in short term. In the long term, set up a new policy review team to look at Nigeria's reform went on the wrong way. It was based on propaganda, on ideology of market fundamentalism. It doesn't work. It failed all over the world. You need to get government back to that business, but get government back in a way that supports investment and private sector, and that lies in the market. So we need to rethink the model and strengthen the budget implementation processes.
But I mean, I'm worried though. The Siemens deal that Nigeria government under President Tinubu entered into, where is it? What has happened to it? We thought that by now in 2023 or thereabout, we should be getting to the point that we should be having some reasonable level of power supply that Nigerians should be happy about. What do you make of those investments? And of course, even the laws that are being signed about how state government can take ownership, how private organization also can go into investment at the starting quota or certain megawatts that private individuals can also tap into without all the legal encumbrances from the weight of the exclusive legislative portion of our laws. What happened to all of those?
Well, the laws they signed may be good, but look, if we don't have this kind of rigorous processes I'm talking about and rethinking, we might multiply sites of failure. I mean, it will be like project failure. A starts project, B starts, C starts. So many states have signed yesterday or two. They look to sign the Electricity Act. Big, okay, go ahead, keep signing. Have you asked why it didn't work at the center? So you factor those failures in your own. I see very poor diagnosis, very poor rigor, very poor social science analysis of problems, and then we keep replicating, laws and programs. The Siemens plan will be a good plan, but how about implementation? How about process? Is it at a scale that can make impact in 3-4 years? I don't know. So we need to audit that project. You see, oftentimes we like to sign up there, but the executory processes and powers, the implementation mechanisms may not be there. And that's really what we should be looking at.
But let me ask you. President Buhari asked that $20 billion, where is the power? The same question. Under President Buhari, 8 years of President Buhari, where is the power? How would you describe the 8 years of Buhari government? Is it back into darkness or deeper in darkness, or we took a step out of darkness?
Well, I think 8 years of Obasanjo was better because we moved to a process of reform that probably had problems. The 16 billion or 20 billion, they talked about trillion, whatever, were not verifiable. But we know that Nigeria is corrupt, so things have. But under Buhari, I think we went backwards because by the time we left in 2015, if there were 2 years that NEC didn't have any leadership, the sector was floundering because Buhari could not appoint NEC people quick enough. So leadership failed under this last 8 years. That's what we're dealing with. So Tinubu would probably start from 2014 to 2015. 2015 till now was basically a mismatch and all failed, basically because no strong leadership brought in jokers as sometimes as ministers, and we saw it with the last person who was selling restaurants somewhere in Oblada or whatever order. I think he really screwed the sector in the last 8 years, and we didn't even build on modest success during that.
So Buhari dipped us back into darkness. Is that what you're saying?
And that's what I'm saying. And structurally undermined the integrity of the process. So we didn't gain 8 years. And that's an 8 years we have had a fast growth, because by that 8 years we have dealt with the critical issues of some of the constraints. You've got a reform going, you've privatized, okay, even though badly done, and get it better. You've made progress. You built all the regulatory framework for the industry. You needed strong leadership to push us further on the learning curve. He actually stagnated us and regressed us a bit. Right?
Of course, I mean, it was under the Buhari government that the Siemens deal, I think it was a slip of tongue to say,
Sure.
It was under the Buhari government, and that Siemens deal has been almost 5 years now, or if I'm not mistaken. But Doc, let me quickly I'll get I'll throw one question at you, then I'll get views from those who are on our Twitter spaces on these UAE Nigeria diplomatic stalemate. We thought that the president had visited the leader of that country, and we thought everything was wrapped up. But I mean, the CNN was quoting one of the officials to say, look, there isn't anything at the lifting of the ban. But the minister had also had an interview saying, look, there are steps towards this. Where is the truth? Is there a deceit here, or there is no clarity, or there is work in progress, or there are things that have been signed that have not come to fruition? How do you see it?
I think, look, the government is still facing very bad press locally, or very bad public opinion in terms of elections, in terms of several things. And so it needed a quick win. Dubai, India didn't fly much, so we didn't have any serious role to play. So we needed to pick one to try. I think there are some progress in discussion, but I think the presidential spokesperson played the first one. There was no agreement, no visa was lifted. I mean, I was still advisor in foreign affairs. I can tell you how this is work. If a visa policy, a major policy was taken, it would have been announced either by the presidents or their foreign ministers, announced in this clear language, not a matter of press release. So I think it speaks to poor management of presidential communication, that it brought more dishonor to the presidency than, in a bid to create good press to get a bad press. And of course, the minister today for foreign affairs made a point that they're still talking with his colleague and they'll come up with something. So that's the truth. The truth is that it's a conversation that the president would have loved to finish and get big victory, but it didn't happen. Country will consider it a strategic issue. By the way, that ban was not just Nigeria. Some countries were also banned with it. So Dubai, UAE doesn't have too much dependencies on Nigeria. It enjoys trade advantage. It's a stronger country, one nation now. So it's not beholden too much to Nigeria to quickly panic. There's nothing that is giving really to make it, quickly change its mind. So it's going to be diplomacy. Maybe down the line we'll get the good news, but there was no such good news. It was all fabrication, done to boost that image, but short term, not strategic thinking, because the news cycle is short. By the time you get that, it goes right there. When the bad news comes, it overshadows the good news. And so that's what happened. They went to press and said, oh, bingo, we got this big deal for Nigeria. There was no deal. Maybe some good inclination, some indications from the president or the minister of that country, and then they went to press. So now we are back to the real thing. Negotiations, discussions, and maybe hopefully they get something at the end of it. But it was a communicational fiasco. It was a crisis that was needless, and it should be a lesson to special spokesperson do not see themselves as propagandists. This is internet age. This is many non-government persons have access to official sources, and they will undo you if you go ahead and carry propaganda.
One day on this podcast, I was traveling and I met someone whom we shared the same flight, and of course we had some time in the layover, and we got talking about the Nigerian Air, Nigerian Air, the one that was spearheaded by Mr. Adisirik. And I promise you that one of these days on this podcast, our viewers, our listeners, we will unravel a lot. And we'll talk about a whole lot of what has happened and went down about that deal, the untold stories of the deal about the Nigerian carrier and all of that. Doc, thanks so much. But give me a moment, Doc. Let me get a few people on Twitter Spaces who are willing to share their views about what we're discussing. And I see a few people that have added to speak. Our first person is Ogechi at Ogechi 15 on Twitter. You have the mic and your mic is on. Is Ogechi there? Okay. If I think there are a few more people who have joined. Let me get one or two more people who are willing to share their views on what we are discussing, and I'll get that in. But before you go, Dr. Amadi, under this Tinubu government, I like your sincere opinion, albeit very brief, on what do you make of the actions, the decisions, the appointments, the policy decision? Does the Tinubu government look like a serious government and one that we can have some sense of hope in?
Well, I think there are some appointees that probably give hope. I mean, because of the pedigree, some of the ministers, and some of the other heads of agencies that clearly qualified persons who have experience and knowledge. But my experience in government showed the real place for the character and the quality of the government is in the presidential cockpit, the villa, what you call the villa. You know, the president, chief of staff, special advisors, who the president listens to. Oftentimes, ministers are going to operationalize policy. So I would like to see more coherence in the policy production. The policy so far of putting the naira where the subsidy was removed doesn't give me faith in the coherence, the quality of policy production. Another point I'd like to make is this government is part of what happened in the Supreme Court. The tribunal has given it some days of life. It's going to struggle even if he wins the Supreme Court. He's going to struggle with legitimacy question. So he needs to try to create some transformation at the level of politics. And this is not happening, but some of the appointees are very corrupt. Some of the ministers, former governors, well, optics at least don't have that optics of transformation, or even the party leader can't do change. So the main problem is that his politics is getting in the way of government. And we know from history of development, economic transformations all over the world, the quality of political settlement is what is the real driver of development. So you might have these smart guys at different ages, but if the politics is still transactional, is kind of suggesting that you are looking at what we gain that political or economically that we want to change. And you're getting people who are not inclined to the level of national consensus on production and not on rentier, not on expropriation and exploitation. If you don't have that kind of thing, then over time, the politics side of it smoother the governance side of it. And that's really my fear. Otherwise, I think he has intelligence enough. He has access to smart people he can use. But the real question for leadership in third world is the political setup. And that depends on the objective of the president. And Tinubu's own political history, with all the issues around it, it does not give that confidence. So we'll wait to see how he navigates, how much he gives prominence to criminal characters, corrupt persons, and how much he really gives prominence to clean, honest, and radical guys. So that balance really is what we define. Let's assume that he's troubled. Then the line, if and when he stabilizes, let's see the character of the government that should have hope of change. Nigerian problem requires some really drastic foundational dealings. It's not about having a smart KPMG guy come out. Those are nonsense, I can tell you. It's not about KPMG, it's not about World Bank, it's not about Harvard. Yes, some of us went to Harvard. If you look at DRC Congo, there are economic blueprints. See the guys around, they're all great Harvard, Yale, blah, blah. But if you look at countries that get it right, what you see is a mixture of competence and credibility and morality. And you don't see many of these business guys, professors of see, take a look at it, because this is the Nigerian economy. It's actually an economy that is designed and created as an economy to be taken from, not to. That's why we're not a productive economy, even if our GDP is the biggest in Africa, because we are not producing. We are relying on the oil windfall and a few private sector. But as an economy, we are not a productive world. And that's because the political side of it has been predatory, right from colonial rule. And so some of us who read political economy know that to have a transformative moment for Nigeria, it's not what to do with coupling together Yale, Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, Presbyterian House, KPMG guys. Mm-hmm. We really have to deal with the problem of the nature of state-society relationship so that people in government know that they are accountable and they have a clear understanding that this is not about getting rich, this is not about settlement, this is not about getting the family to be richer and all that. No, that is I think the Nigerian problem. That's why I'm not going to place too much faith in the government based on a few of these good, educated, maybe high-ranking persons in government.
All right. Now, let me get one or two persons so that we can wrap up on this podcast. Mazi Nzako is on. I don't know if you're ready to speak on the podcast. Your mic is on.
Yes, Sheon, good afternoon from here. Doctor, good afternoon, and good afternoon, Nigerians.
Good afternoon.
I think the biggest problem we have in our country, our beloved country, is the fact that there is no consequences for actions. People can do anything and get away with it. Any country that behaves that way will never come out of its problem. Anybody can be government, anybody can be anything, because everywhere is porous. There is loopholes in every sector of the government we have in Nigeria. So, are you telling me that the spokesperson of the presidency does not know what the agreement was for him to come and lie to 200 million Nigerians, and he is still working? By this time, he should have resigned and gone, because he don't know what he's doing. So these things will continue to happen. These people are the same people that worked under Buhari, and we are bringing them, moving them, all of them to Tinubu'S government. And we think we are going to have any form of change. No, everything will remain the same. I expected this president to come in and start, first of all, finding a way to unite the nation. The nation is divided. You can't rule a divided people. You cannot. Thank you, Sheung.
Thank you so much, Mazi Nzako. I see Dr. Femi Yekini at FemYek on Twitter. Are you ready to share your view just in 30 seconds? If you are, your mic is on.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much, Sharon. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Nigeria. Thank you for the opportunity. I just have a few words to say. First of all, let me start with the issue of the UAE visa ban. I think the right person that needs to maybe be on the space to make some clarifications is actually a jury to tell us exactly what is going on, if there is a kind of issues between the two governments. Because, I mean, for him to come online, to come and make categorical statements, I don't believe that he will just come online and lie intentionally. So and I understand also when the news first broke, also the CNN also carried it before we started reading about some other information today. So I think the special advisor to the president needs to come out and clear out this discrepancies in the information. I think so. I don't want to cast any aspersions here, but I mean it's a very good thing where the president himself decided to take the bull by the horn and to go over there and to try to work things out. I mean,
let me play the devil's advocate here and imagine that this is perhaps what is happening based on one of those things that Dr. Amadi also said. Let's imagine that the two governments had maybe a 7-point, there was a 7-point demand from President Tinubu to the UAE government.
Yes.
And the UAE government says, in principle, we have agreed. But my people will look at it.
Yes.
Let your own people do their own part of the deal. And afterwards, we might be able to, because if that is not done, you cannot leave the ban. But there are other things that have to be done. There are monies that has to be paid. There are things, policies that have to be made. What if this is exactly what is going on? If you look at it, there are those in the early stages who said, on the side of the UAE, there wasn't anything like a lift of the visa ban. It was Nigeria that was mouthing visa ban. What if this is what is happening?
Exactly. And I quite agree with you, Sean, on that. I think maybe probably maybe Mr. Aguri dumped the gun a little bit. I'm not sure. That's why I think he's the best person to come, because they were the ones that were there, during the meeting. But I don't want to cast any aspersions yet. They need to come out and tell us exactly what it is. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's a very good move for the president to try to work on it, and hopefully everything will be cleared up. That's number one. Number two, on the issue of the power. Now the problem I see that we have as a country is that once every government comes, instead of starting from where that other government finishes, this new government wants to do a practically different thing. We have this problem coupled with the fact that we don't have a very good maintenance culture in this country. So now, I remember when President Muhammadu Buhari came, one of the issues that arose then was that, the PDP spent all these billions of dollars, the Jonathan government on power, we didn't see anything, and President Buhari too had it for 8 years. What have they really done? Now, Tinubu is there. Instead of forming a totally new policy, they probably need to study what went wrong, what is going on, what have the Buhari government done very well, what have they not done, and move on from there. I mean, for God's sake, power is not a rocket science. As in to get, it's not rocket science. A lot of people have done it. If what we have currently is not working, we can look into other means, into other mediums, and begin to develop them. And most importantly, we need a very radical person in that power ministry. We don't need a docile minister. We need somebody that can take the bulls by the horn. We need somebody that can go face to face, with whoever it is, because I understand that one of the major problems in that sector may be corruption, and the fact that some other ministers have tried to do something, their efforts have been destroyed because all these people benefiting from generators and the rest of them. But we need somebody whose character we can actually vouch for, that can go in that ministry and stand whichever of the mountain that is there to work on it. I mean, we shouldn't be talking about power issues in this dispensation. We should be talking about other deliverables. That's all I want to say for right now. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you so much. Let me get one or two more persons. Thank you so much, Dr. Femi Yakini, for your interventions. I don't know if African Mosque at Mark Zami is ready on Twitter space on Twitter. Are you ready? Or if it's not, Victor Onyaba at C Onyaba on Twitter. Are you ready?
Oh yes, I'm ready.
Very good. Please shoot your interventions in about 30 seconds, if you may.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you, Doctor, as well, for your analysis. I think on the visa issue with UAE, I think it was a bad submission by the presidential representative. I think that was really off track. But however, I believe that there's been a lot of traction in terms of resolving that issue of visa, because these things don't start in one day. I mean, these processes have been ongoing for some time before the president went to UAE, which was a good leadership move, which was a good move. But what we're looking for is correct reporting, insightful reporting, and telling Nigerians the truth, and not coming on national television and bullshitting over 200 million people and then telling us crap. That is bad. I think he needs to retract that statement, and he needs to apologize to Nigeria and report. He's doing a good job for sure, but he needs to give us concrete, accurate, consistent reporting on what happened and not what isn't happening. And that's wrong. Thank you.
All right. I like that, Dr. Amadi. I'd like you to wrap up and give us your views on what the submissions of everyone, so that we can call it a day on the podcast.
Well, I think the comments they made are correct. I like the idea that we should have a minister who is strong, not corrupt. That means you have a small group to select from. Most of the people who are in Nigerian politics are corrupt. So very few are not corrupt and strong, not building special interests, and smart enough to vote. Secondly, I agree with him that even the issue around Dubai, which is that ongoing, but it push, and hopefully we'll get a result. But it's a warning to spokesperson. Politics, it might look attractive to lie and save posters for the moment. I mean, again, should not confuse rhetoric, good gift of gab with making sense. Two different things. Speech is strategic. You don't just say anything. Then say it and feel good, and then the impact will be boomerang against. Speech should be strategic, designed to address issues and build confidence. So I think they felt this lesson. They felt this one then approach style, which is tell the truth, tell it all the time, tell it in a way that people, even if it's a bad news, people understand. In fact, you could have said all the paint has done. The paint has met with the president, right? The paint has said this, has said that. This is what I've agreed. Paint is committed to ensuring this works. And once this to happen, in a couple of days, I bet it's going to do everything. That will resurrect the people. They're saying, oh, hooray, got this visa, and then 2 days after, no visa, no removal of visa ban. That's bad communication. So I guess going forward, lessons from the event. The people need truth. Like John Owen said, government is the act of telling the truth.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amadi. I really appreciate it. Well, the government must see power supply as very crucial to economic recovery in a situation where businesses are struggling to stay afloat after the removal of subsidy. Dealing with a terrible outage will only make a bad situation worse. On the other issue, diplomatic issues require diplomacy. It's obvious that, as they may sound, it is the basis of intergovernmental relationships. There are lines of communication, and that should not be trivialized. Is Nigeria government learning from its own mistakes and previous administrations? Well, Albert Einstein once said, the only mistake in life is the lesson not learned. On that note, we'll wrap up on the podcast tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for being part of the conversation. Dr. Sam Amadi, a former chairman of the Electricity Regulation Commission. Thank you so much indeed for your time on the podcast. And I thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Until next week, I'll see you again, everyone. I'm Seun Akimale. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of Mike On Podcast with Seun Akimale. Mike On Podcast for the independent mind. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Mike On Podcast with Seun Akimale. Mike On Podcast for the independent mind.